You ever notice how some people think they're the smartest in the room until life proves them wrong in the most embarrassing way possible? Well, that's exactly what happened in this story. Imagine a high school buzzing with the usual teenage chaos, students rushing through hallways, lockers slamming, and teachers trying to keep order. In the middle of it all, there was Mr. Thompson, the math teacher who loved showing off how brilliant he was. You know the type, always talking down to people, tossing around big words, and acting like everyone else was beneath him. Now here's where it gets interesting. The janitor at this school, Mr. Davis, was a quiet black man in his late 50s. He was the kind of guy who showed up early, worked late, and treated everyone with kindness, even when people didn't show him the same respect. But sadly, not everyone saw his worth. Some kids ignored him, some whispered behind his back, and one teacher, yes, Mr. Thompson, decided to mock him publicly. One day, in front of a class full of students, Mr. Thompson thought it would be funny to pick on Mr. Davis. He actually called him into the classroom while he was mopping the hallway. With this smug grin, he scribbled a long calculus problem across the board, something with crazy fractions, limits, and exponents, and said, "Hey Davis, think you can solve this one? Or is it a little above your pay grade?" The room erupted in awkward laughter. Some students giggled, others looked down, uncomfortable. And Mr. Davis? He just stood there with his mop, calm and steady, eyes scanning that board. At first you'd think he'd feel humiliated, maybe even walk away, but instead, something else happened. He leaned on his mop, gave a half smile, and asked, "Are you sure you want me to try this in front of your students?" That line caught everyone off guard. Even the students perked up. They weren't used to seeing Mr. Davis talk back, let alone with that kind of quiet confidence. The tension in the room was thick. You could feel it. Mr. Thompson chuckled nervously like he didn't expect any pushback. "Sure," he said, "show us what you've got." And that's when everything began to change. Mr. Davis calmly set his mop aside, walked toward the board, and picked up the chalk. You could hear the room go silent, like everyone stopped breathing for a second. The students were leaning forward in their seats, eyes wide, because let's be honest, who expects the janitor to solve calculus on the spot? And you could see Mr. Thompson's grin stretching wider, certain he was about to humiliate him. But the look in Mr. Davis's eyes told a different story. He started writing, not slowly, not fumbling, not guessing. He moved with precision. First, he broke the problem down into smaller steps. Then, with the kind of confidence that comes from years of practice, he explained what he was doing as he went. "First, you simplify the expression," he said, his deep voice calm, steady. "Then, you find the derivative of this part. And once you isolate the variable, the rest follows naturally." The students' jaws practically dropped. You know how classrooms usually buzz with whispers? Not this time. Every single kid was locked in, eyes darting between the board and Mr. Davis. They were seeing something they never expected. Brilliance coming from a man society had tried to put in a box. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson's smirk started fading. His arms crossed tighter, his face stiffened, and you could almost see the sweat forming on his forehead. It was like watching a magician realize his trick had gone horribly wrong. He had wanted to embarrass Mr. Davis, but the tables were turning fast. Within minutes, the problem was solved, perfectly. Not a number out of place, not a step skipped. Mr. Davis placed the chalk back in the tray. Us turned to the room, and with that same quiet smile asked, "Does that look right to you?" The class exploded in cheers, claps, and even whistles. A few students jumped out of their seats, laughing in disbelief. One kid shouted, "No way!" Another yelled, "Mr. Davis is a genius!" The pride on their faces was undeniable. They weren't just entertained, they were inspired. And for the first time, Mr. Thompson had nothing to say. His plan had backfired, and he stood frozen, red-faced, trying to hold on to whatever dignity he thought he had left. But this was just the beginning. What Mr. Davis revealed next would stun the entire school, and it had nothing to do with mops or math problems. The buzz from that classroom didn't stay contained for long. By the end of the day, the story had spread through the entire school like wildfire. You know how teenagers are. News travels faster than Wi-Fi. By lunch period, everyone was whispering about how the janitor had schooled the math teacher at his own game. Some kids were even reenacting the scene, pretending to mop the floor and then scribble equations on imaginary boards. It was hilarious, but it was also powerful. And yet, while the students were celebrating, Mr. Thompson was fuming. He couldn't believe his authority had been undercut in front of 30 students. For him, it wasn't just about a math problem, it was about power. And the fact that a black janitor had outshined him made his bruised ego even more painful. So instead of owning up to what happened, he doubled down. He started spreading little comments in the teacher's lounge, muttering things like, "Yeah, Davis got lucky. Anyone can memorize a formula." Or, "It was a fluke. Don't make a big deal out of it." But the students weren't buying it. They started treating Mr. Davis differently. Kids who once walked past him without a word now said, "Hey, Mr. D," in the hallways. Some stopped to chat with him, asking how he knew calculus. A few even asked for help with their homework. For the first time in years, Mr. Davis felt seen, not as the janitor, but as a person with knowledge and wisdom worth respecting. One day after school, a group of students cornered him near the lockers. "Mr. Davis, seriously, how did you know all that math? Did you study it somewhere?" He chuckled softly, leaning on his mop like it was a cane. "Let's just say I wasn't always a janitor," he replied. The kids pressed him for more, but he left it at that, giving them a wink before continuing his work. That mystery only made them more curious. And here's the kicker. It wasn't just curiosity, it was admiration. These students were realizing that intelligence and dignity don't come with a job title. They come from within. Mr. Davis was becoming something bigger than just the guy who cleaned their classrooms. He was turning into a symbol of resilience, of hidden brilliance, of quiet strength. But behind all this respect and admiration, a storm was brewing. Mr. Thompson wasn't done. He was plotting his next move. And this time, he intended to put Mr. Davis back in his place. Mr. Thompson couldn't stand it. Every time he walked down the hall, he overheard students whispering about how the janitor had outsmarted him. For a man who lived off his pride, it was unbearable. He had to prove that what happened was a fluke, so he cooked up a plan. A week later, during his advanced math class, he spotted Mr. Davis sweeping the corridor. With a smug grin, he waved him in again. "Hey, Davis," he called, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Since you're apparently the new math whiz around here, how about solving something a little harder this time?" The students exchanged wide-eyed looks. They knew what was happening. Round 2. This time, the board was covered in a monstrous equation. Integrals stacked on top of each other, limits wrapped in square roots, variables tangled like spaghetti. Mr. Thompson even laughed as he capped the marker, turning to his class. "Now let's see how far a mop and bucket get you with this one." The room went silent again. All eyes turned to Mr. Davis. You could almost feel the tension pressing down, like the whole school was holding its breath. Mr. Davis set his broom aside, slowly walked up and studied the problem. For a few seconds he just stood there, nodding slightly like he was remembering an old song. Then, without hesitation, he picked up the marker and began. This time, though, he didn't just solve the problem, he taught it. Step by step, he broke it down, explaining concepts in a way that was so clear even the students who usually dreaded math were leaning in. "Notice here," he said, "how the function approaches infinity. Most people freeze up here, but it's simpler than you think." His tone wasn't condescending, it was patient, almost fatherly. The students weren't just impressed, they were learning. By the time he finished, the board looked like a masterpiece of logic and order. He underlined the final answer, put the marker down, and quietly stepped aside. The classroom erupted again. Some students clapped, others shouted, "Legend!" One even said, "Mr. Davis should be teaching this class, not you." That comment landed like a dagger. Mr. Thompson's face turned crimson, his jaw clenched. And in that moment, everyone realized this wasn't just a battle of math problems anymore. This was about respect, dignity, and a man who refused to be underestimated. The second showdown sent shockwaves beyond the classroom. By the end of the week, the story wasn't just student gossip anymore. Teachers were talking about it. Parents were hearing it from their kids at dinner tables. Even the principal had caught wind of how the janitor had dismantled 2 calculus problems that left a veteran math teacher humiliated. But the person most rattled was, of course, Mr. Thompson. His pride couldn't handle it. Every laugh he overheard in the hallway felt like it was directed at him. Every time he saw Mr. Davis, it felt like a reminder of his defeat. And because Mr. Thompson wasn't the type to self-reflect, he did what insecure people often do. He turned bitter and mean. He started throwing shade whenever he could. "Careful with those floors," he'd mutter sarcastically as Mr. Davis passed by. In the teacher's lounge, he complained that the students were getting distracted by nonsense. He even hinted that Davis had cheated somehow, though no one could explain how a janitor could cheat at calculus. Meanwhile, the students were rallying around Mr. Davis more than ever. They started greeting him like a celebrity. "There he is, the math king," some would shout down the halls. One afternoon, a group of seniors even brought him a piece of chalk as a gift wrapped in a bow, like he was some kind of math superhero. Davis laughed, humbly shaking his head. But the truth was, deep down, it warmed his heart. For years, he had walked those halls invisible. Now he was being seen. Still, the mystery lingered. How did a school janitor know so much advanced math? Whispers floated around. Some students guessed he had been a teacher once. Others thought maybe he was secretly studying for a degree. The rumors grew so wild that a few kids even started a Mr. D fan club online, posting memes of him holding a mop in one hand and chalk in the other. But behind his quiet smile, Mr. Davis carried a story no one knew. A story that explained not only his brilliance, but also his humility. And the truth was about to come out because the principal decided to call Mr. Davis into her office after hearing all the commotion. What came out in that meeting would change the way everyone at the school looked at him forever. When the principal, Mrs. Reynolds, called Mr. Davis into her office, he walked in calmly, not sure what to expect. She gestured for him to sit down, her face a mix of curiosity and seriousness. "Mr. Davis," she began, "I've been hearing quite a lot about you these past 2 weeks. Students, teachers, even parents are talking about how you solved advanced calculus problems in class. Twice. I need to ask, how exactly do you know this level of math?" Mr. Davis leaned back slightly, folded his hands, and gave a gentle smile. "Well, Mrs. Reynolds, let's just say cleaning floors isn't the only thing I know how to do." She raised an eyebrow, waiting for more. Finally, he sighed and spoke. "Before I became a janitor, I was actually a professor of mathematics." The words hung in the air like a lightning strike. Mrs. Reynolds blinked, stunned. "A professor?" He nodded. "Yes, at a university down south. I earned my master's degree, nearly finished my PhD. I loved teaching, helping young people see the beauty in numbers, but life doesn't always go the way you plan." He went on to explain how years ago his wife had fallen seriously ill. The medical bills piled up. He took leave from his teaching position to care for her, but the university didn't hold the spot for long. After she passed, he struggled to get back into academia. Discrimination played a part too. Applications were ignored, interviews cut short. Doors that should have been opened slammed shut, sometimes politely, sometimes not. Eventually, the only steady job he could find was janitorial work at this very school. Mrs. Reynolds listened, her eyes softening. The weight of his story wasn't just about math, it was about resilience, survival, and sacrifice. "And you never told anyone?" she asked quietly. He shrugged. "Didn't seem necessary. Kids don't need to know their janitor used to be a professor. They just need clean classrooms and hallways that shine." But now the truth was out, and Mrs. Reynolds knew it couldn't stay hidden. She leaned forward. "Mr. Davis, what you've been through and what you know deserves to be shared. I think it's time the whole school heard your story." What happened next would put Mr. Davis in front of the entire student body, and Mr. Thompson wouldn't be able to avoid it. A week later, the principal called a special school assembly. The students filed into the auditorium, buzzy, on with speculation. Rumors swirled. Was there a new policy, a pep rally, a surprise guest speaker? None of them expected who would walk onto the stage. When Mr. Davis stepped into the spotlight, the room fell silent. Some kids blinked in confusion. Others whispered, "Wait, is that the janitor?" He stood tall, his hands clasped in front of him, his work uniform neatly pressed. Mrs. Reynolds took the podium and said, "Students, staff, today you're going to hear a story that proves you should never judge someone by their title or their uniform." Then she gestured to Mr. Davis. He began to speak, his voice steady and deep. "Most of you know me as the man who sweeps your halls and empties your trash, and I take pride in that work because every job has dignity. But what you don't know is that I used to stand in classrooms like this, not with a mop in my hand, but with chalk. I taught mathematics at the university level for many years." Gasps rippled through the audience. Students leaned forward, hanging on every word. "Life," he continued, "has a way of testing us. When my wife fell ill, I left my position to care for her. After she passed, I tried to return to teaching, but doors didn't open the way I hoped. I faced rejection after rejection. Some of it was circumstance, some of it was the color of my skin." The room went dead quiet, his honesty hit like a punch to the gut. "So I took the work I could find, janitorial work. And let me tell you something, it doesn't matter what uniform you wear. Your worth isn't measured by your paycheck or your title. It's measured by the knowledge you carry, the kindness you show, and the respect you give to others." Students erupted in applause, some even standing. For many, it was the first time they had thought about how society treats people who don't fit into neat categories. Mr. Davis wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a living lesson. But not everyone was clapping. From the back row, Mr. Thompson sat stiffly, arms crossed, his jaw clenched. For him, this wasn't inspiration. It was humiliation in front of the entire school, and he wasn't going to let it slide. The days after the assembly were electric. Students walked the halls with a new respect for Mr. Davis. Some even started calling him Professor D, half joking, half serious. Teachers who had once overlooked him now greeted him warmly. His story had struck a nerve, reminding everyone that wisdom doesn't always wear a suit and tie. But for Mr. Thompson, the humiliation burned deeper with each passing day. In his mind, the assembly hadn't honored Mr. Davis. It had embarrassed him. His authority as the school's math expert felt shattered. Students whispered about how the janitor was smarter than the teacher. And every time a kid smiled at Mr. Davis, Thompson saw it as a personal attack. One afternoon, he cornered Mr. Davis in the hallway. His voice was low, bitter. "Enjoying your little spotlight? Don't think for a second this makes you a teacher again. You're still just the janitor." Mr. Davis didn't flinch. He looked him straight in the eye and said, "You know, Mr. Thompson, it's not me you're fighting, it's your own pride." Then he calmly picked up his mop bucket and walked away. That line cut deeper than any calculus problem ever could. Still, Thompson wasn't done. He decided to strike back publicly. In class the next day, he ranted to his students, "Don't get fooled by theatrics. Math isn't about a lucky guess. Real teachers train for years to do this properly. A janitor doesn't suddenly qualify because he solved a few problems." But here's the twist. His words backfired. Students weren't convinced. In fact, they grew defensive of Mr. Davis. One girl raised her hand and shot back, "But he explained it better than you ever have." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. Thompson's face reddened as he struggled to regain control, realizing the respect he once commanded was slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, Mr. Davis continued his work with quiet dignity. He wasn't looking for glory. He wasn't trying to steal the spotlight. But the more Thompson tried to drag him down, the higher the students lifted him up. And soon, an opportunity arose that neither of them could ignore. An opportunity that would put their knowledge, their pride, and their character to the ultimate test. That opportunity came when the school announced its annual academic showcase, a big event where students, parents, and community members gathered to watch presentations, competitions, and talent displays. Normally, it was just another evening of science projects and debate club skits, but this year the math department had an idea, a live problem-solving challenge, where tough math problems would be solved in real time on stage. The second Mr. Thompson heard about it, he saw his chance. He convinced the organizers to let him represent the faculty. But then, in a move that shocked everyone, the student council nominated Mr. Davis to stand alongside him. At first, the principal hesitated. It wasn't typical for staff outside teaching to participate, but the roar of support from the students was impossible to ignore. And so it was set. Mr. Thompson versus Mr. Davis, side by side, solving math in front of the entire town. The night of the showcase, the auditorium was packed. Parents filled the rows, students waved handmade posters, some read "Go Professor D," others had doodles of a mop and chalkboard. The energy was buzzing, almost like a sports game. Mr. Thompson walked onto the stage in a crisp suit, his jaw tight, eyes locked straight ahead. Moments later, Mr. Davis stepped out in his janitor's uniform, sleeves rolled up, looking calm and steady. The crowd erupted in cheers. The first problem flashed on the screen, a complex calculus scenario involving limits and exponential growth. Thompson pounced on it, scribbling furiously, determined to outpace his opponent. Davis, on the other hand, moved slower, methodically, deliberately. As Thompson's handwriting sprawled across his board, Davis explained each step aloud, making the math come alive for the audience. "See here," he said, "when a function approaches infinity, it's not chaos, it's a pattern. You just have to know where to look." The parents leaned forward, nodding. The students cheered every time his explanation clicked. And when both men revealed their final answers, Davis's was not only correct but beautifully presented. Thompson's, in his rush, had a mistake buried in the middle. The crowd noticed. A murmur spread. For the third time, the janitor had outshined the teacher. But this time, the stakes were higher, because the whole community had witnessed it. The auditorium was electric. Students leapt to their feet, clapping and cheering as Mr. Davis stepped back from the board. Parents joined in, their applause echoing through the room like thunder. Some even gave him a standing ovation. It wasn't just about the math anymore, it was about dignity, resilience, and a man who had refused to be boxed in by stereotypes. Mr. Thompson stood frozen, marker still in his hand, his face pale and stiff. He knew the truth now. This wasn't a battle he could win. It wasn't just that Mr. Davis had the right answers. It was that he carried himself with a grace and humility that Thompson had never shown. The contrast was undeniable. When the noise finally settled, Mrs. Reynolds stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "tonight we've learned a lesson far more valuable than calculus. We've learned that greatness doesn't come from titles or positions. It comes from character, perseverance, and knowledge that can't be taken away." She turned toward Davis. "Mr. Davis, you are a teacher in every sense of the word." The audience roared again, chanting, "Professor D! Professor D!" For the first time in years, Mr. Davis allowed himself a wide smile. He wasn't just seen, he was celebrated. After the showcase, students crowded around him asking for a applauded device, laughing, taking photos. Parents shook his hand, some with tears in their eyes. Even teachers who had once overlooked him now offered words of respect. Mr. Davis had gone from being invisible to unforgettable. And as for Mr. Thompson, he left quietly through a side door, his pride shattered. For him, it was a harsh lesson, that arrogance and prejudice only lead to downfall. For the school, it was a turning point. The janitor wasn't just the janitor anymore. He had become a living reminder that brilliance can shine from the most unexpected places. So let me ask you, how many people around us carry untold stories? How many hidden geniuses walk right past us every day, dismissed because of what they wear or the job they do? This story reminds us to look deeper, to respect people for who they are, not just what we see on the surface. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or maybe even opened your eyes a little, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Because we've got more powerful, true stories that will shock you, challenge you, and maybe even change the way you see the world.